Despite widespread Unionist opposition and voices of discontent within sections of the Nationalist community, authorities pushed ahead with the Sunningdale experiment, and the executive took its place in January 1974. However, despite any optimism around these attempts, tensions had been building and Unionism was fragmenting, leading to the decisive elections of February 1974, which became a virtual referendum on Sunningdale.
But from going to school, I was talking to lots of nationalists or Republican people who live in West Belfast and North Belfast, and certainly from talking to them, they really thought Sunningdale was the best thing ever. You know, the fact that they were going to at last have some power, and it wasn't just so much power. I think when I remember one of the fellas that I went to school with, he said, and it's always stuck in me, he said, it wasn't that much that we were getting power, it's that we're getting respect. We're going to be treated like human beings. We're going to be treated the same as anybody else. And that always stuck in my mind. Because I was 11 or 12 or whatever it was when that was said to me. And I've never forgotten it.
My impression at the time was that they were quite pleased. For the first time, their elected representatives were in a position of governing, and all politicians really aspire to being in government of some kind. That's the reason for getting into politics. And if anything, it increased the feeling of isolation that many of the loyalists would have. Because, and I've mentioned this before, these were clearly competent people, educated people, people behaving the way politicians actually should behave. And for nationalism, yes, this was a good thing, unquote.
Well, I would say because you have to remember that the IRA is at its strength, it's probably its most powerful at that period of time, and they would have just been totally opposed to it, and their intention would have been to bring it down as well. Well, they didn't need to. All had to do was sit back and allow the Unionists to do that. But that would have been their instinct. Their instinct, I think, would have been to diametrically oppose it, because it would have been seen as a consolidation of partition, not in any way a change or even an interference with it, but a consolidation of partition.
Well, Unionism let itself down during this whole period. I mean, they fragmented. The one way they would have stopped losing ground was to unite, give up their differences. But maybe the differences did represent genuine strains of thought or policy direction. I mean, there's so much to look at there in whether Bill Craig was as right-wing as people make him out to be, because he actually, in the end, was entertaining the idea of community government. Others were entertaining the idea of independence, in the belief that independence would create a more equal society and create a bond between Catholic and Protestant and so on. So it's not entirely straightforward why Unionism became so divided, but divided it was, and it paid the price of division.
You had Ian Paisley and the Democratic Unionist Party coming up, and then you had Craig and Vanguard coming along, being one of the more extreme wings of that. So that was enough to bring together the united opposition politically. You know, the United Unionist Ulster Unionist Council, I think it was called at the time, UUUC, and then obviously they had talks waiting to prepare for this with paramilitaries.
Well, I think you've always had fracture in unionism. You had you had the Vanguard Party, etc. You had Bill Craig and all who had left the Unionist Party. But I think most people still support mainstream Ulster Unionists. The Orange Order were strongly linked to the Ulster Unionists. But you had individuals, you had Paisley himself then, and the DUP started. So it was a bit of fragmentation, but overall it was held together pretty strong in the centre. I think this was the first major fracture when Faulkner decided to go for this.
So you reject the notion of the election as a referendum on Sunningdale?
Yes, I don't regard it as that at all. I believe that the election is quite frankly going to turn out on very much a referendum. Does Northern Ireland want to stay in the United Kingdom, or does she favour independence?
But obviously he carried it through and went to Sunningdale and came back with the Council of Ireland settlement, and obviously there was I think the SDLP were very pleased with Sunningdale, but there was a lot of Unionist discontent with Sunningdale and with the package, but it was predominantly the Council of Ireland, the Sunningdale. What was the phrase? Dublin is only a Sunningdale away, I think, was the posters that were up in Belfast at the time. And then, of course, the deal was done in January, but in February 1974 there was a general election, and the United Unionist Coalition, standing on this slogan, I think, Dublin is only a Sunningdale away, won 11 out of 12 seats.
And then secondly, when they called a general election, which was disastrous really for unionists, like, if you like, moderate unionism, Partian type unionism, and the key bogeyman, as it were, in that election was Council of Ireland. We're talking within unionism here, and it meant that all but one of the MPs who returned were returned on the basis of opposition to Sunningdale.
I remember the election. I remember Paisley on the back of a flatbed lorry, I think it was a coal lorry, and the pass band, Donegal pass band, being out, people with buckets, driving slowly around the street, him shouting, about this basically as a vote for whether Ulster remains part of the United Kingdom, or it's a slippery slope to Rome rule and a united Ireland, and people coming out and putting whatever they had in the buckets. Like, these people had nothing, absolutely nothing.
And again, there was that fear, and we're seeing that fear here today. Maybe not to the same degree, in number crunching, but there was a genuine fear in Protestant communities that that there were no longer going to be an Ulster.
The early 74 election had a change of government, and then here you saw that the kind of I would call reactionary unionist bloc was powerful. So if you were looking for the dominant unionist voice to be one that said, we're a divided society and the best way to deal with it is to share, then you were sensing trouble ahead. And then you had a change of government in London, which didn't feel like it was going to be benign.